The UK is getting serious about deportations. Since July 2024, the Home Office has removed thousands of people from the country. This is a big jump from previous years. The government says it's about enforcing the rules. They want to send a message. Illegal immigration will not be tolerated. But not everyone agrees with this approach. Human rights groups are worried. They say the deportations are happening too fast. They are concerned that people are being removed without proper consideration of their cases. Is the UK prioritizing removals over human rights? The debate is heating up. On one side, there's a push for stricter immigration controls. On the other side, there's concern for the welfare of vulnerable individuals. The situation is complex, with no easy answers. One thing is for sure, the UK's deportation drive is having a significant impact. Other numbers tell a stark story. Since July 2024, almost 19,000 people have been deported from the UK. That's the highest number in 5 years. These removals include people who were denied asylum, foreign criminals, and those who overstayed their visas. The government is clear they want to increase these numbers even further. The majority of those deported were sent back to Europe and Asia. Countries like Albania, Pakistan, and Nigeria have received a significant number of deportees. These figures raise questions about the UK's approach to international cooperation on immigration. Are these countries equipped to handle the influx of returnees? The Home Office publishes regular statistics on deportations. These figures provide a glimpse into the scale of the government's efforts. However, the statistics don't tell the whole story. Behind each number is a human life, uprooted and uncertain. It's important to remember the individual stories amidst the data. The Labour government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer is taking a hard line on immigration. They've promised to crack down on illegal immigration. They say it's about fairness and protecting borders. The government argues that uncontrolled immigration puts a strain on public services. One of Labour's key moves was scrapping the controversial Rwanda policy. This policy, introduced by the previous Conservative government, aimed to send asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing. Labour criticised the policy as inhumane and ineffective. Instead, they focused on increasing deportations to other countries. Labour has also ramped up enforcement. They've given more power and resources to Border Force. They've introduced stricter penalties for businesses employing undocumented workers. The message is clear: the UK is a less welcoming place for those trying to enter or stay illegally. The Home Office is taking a multi-pronged approach to enforcement. One tactic is targeting businesses suspected of employing undocumented workers. Raids on restaurants, car washes, and construction sites have become more frequent. These raids often make headlines, showcasing the government's commitment to tackling illegal working. The Home Office also carries out targeted operations to apprehend individuals with no right to be in the UK. These operations can involve door-to-door checks and increased patrols in areas with large immigrant populations. The government argues that these measures are necessary to deter illegal immigration and protect national security. Critics argue that these raids and roundups create a climate of fear, particularly among immigrant communities. They point to cases of racial profiling and wrongful detention. The impact on community relations and trust in law enforcement is a significant concern. The UK relies heavily on chartered flights to carry out deportations. These flights, often shrouded in secrecy, transport large groups of people back to their countries of origin or countries they have passed through. The use of chartered flights has been criticised for its lack of transparency and potential for human rights abuses. The government argues that chartered flights are a necessary and cost-effective way to carry out deportations. They maintain that all removals are conducted in accordance with international law. However, human rights groups argue that the use of chartered flights makes it difficult to monitor conditions and ensure that deportees' rights are protected. The destinations of these flights vary, but some countries, like Albania and Vietnam, have received a significant number of deportees in recent months. This has raised questions about the UK's relationships with these countries and whether they have the capacity to receive and reintegrate returnees. Section 6: International agreements working with other nations. The UK is actively seeking international cooperation to manage migration. The government has signed agreements with several countries, aiming to make it easier to return people who have no right to be in the UK. These agreements often involve sharing information and resources to combat illegal immigration. One example is the UK's agreement with Italy to tackle people smuggling gangs operating across the English Channel. This collaboration involves sharing intelligence and coordinating law enforcement efforts to disrupt smuggling networks. The government claims that these partnerships are crucial in tackling the complex challenges of illegal immigration. However, critics argue that these agreements often come at a price. They express concerns that the UK may be turning a blind eye to human rights abuses in partner countries in exchange for their cooperation on deportations. The ethics of these collaborations are a subject of ongoing debate. Section 7. Offshore processing, a controversial solution. The UK government is exploring the possibility of processing asylum seekers offshore. This controversial approach involves sending asylum seekers to another country while their claims are being processed. The government argues that this will deter people from making dangerous journeys to the UK and break the business model of people smugglers. The government has faced significant opposition to its offshore processing plans. Human rights groups argue that it is inhumane and impractical. They point to the logistical challenges and the potential for human rights abuses in these offshore centres. The legality of such a scheme is also being questioned. The government insists that any offshore processing would be done in accordance with international law and that the welfare of asylum seekers would be paramount. However, the policy remains highly controversial, with many seeing it as an attempt to outsource the UK's responsibilities to refugees. Section 8. Voices of concern. Human rights under threat. Human rights organisations have been vocal in their criticism of the UK's deportation drive. They argue that the government's focus on removals is coming at the expense of human rights. Amnesty International has accused the government of prioritising speed over fairness in its deportation practices. One of the main concerns is the lack of due process. Human rights groups argue that many people are being deported without having a proper opportunity to present their case or challenge their removal. They also highlight the lack of access to legal aid and support, which disproportionately affects vulnerable individuals. Another major concern is the risk of sending people back to danger. Human rights groups argue that the UK is not doing enough to assess the risks faced by deportees upon return. They point to cases of people being sent back to countries where they face persecution or torture. Section 9. The human cost, impacts and implications. The UK's deportation drive is having a profound impact on the lives of thousands of people. Families are being torn apart, individuals are being uprooted from their communities, and dreams are being shattered. The human cost of these policies is immeasurable. Beyond the statistics are stories of hardship, despair, and uncertainty. The long-term implications of this approach are still unfolding. The government argues that these measures are necessary to deter illegal immigration and protect national security. However, critics argue that they are counterproductive, creating a climate of fear and pushing people underground. They also question the ethics of a system that prioritizes removals over compassion and human rights. The UK's deportation drive raises fundamental questions about the country's values and its obligations to those seeking safety and a better life. As the debate continues, it's crucial to remember the human stories at the heart of this complex issue.